Prime Minister Mark Carney is defending a controversial proposal introduced by his government. He says a plan to help convert thousands of unsold condos into affordable housing in BC is not intended to bail out condo developers, as critics allege. He also says his government has done a poor job of explaining the recently announced program. So CBC's Katie DeRosa has been following this story, and she joins us now to help explain all of this. Katie, how has Carney responded to criticism that this initiative amounts to what I guess a lot of people are, or some critics anyway, are calling a bailout for developers?
Well, first, a bit of the background here. Metro Vancouver is facing a glut of unsold condos, more than 4,000. So last week, Mark Carney was in Vancouver about to watch the FIFA game with David Eby, and they announced this housing plan. One of the planks of the plan was this empty condo buy program to turn them into affordable housing. But there wasn't a lot of other details, such as the price tag. And in the absence of those details, critics swooped in and basically said this is a taxpayer-funded bailout that Mark Carney wants to just help developers and bankers. And so here is how he responded to that today.
We don't care about the developer. We care about the person, the family that can potentially move into the home. So buying them at a discount at the right time, financing, terming that out, setting up a rent-to-own structure for truly affordable housing. That's an opportunity.
So a few more details were provided today about the cost. For example, Mark Carney said each Ottawa and BC will put in $150 million for a combined $300 million, and then the other $1 billion will be financing that will be paid back to the government through a rent-to-buy program. But we still don't know who will qualify for that rent-to-buy program, where the condos will be. So there are still a lot of questions here.
Katie, so the Prime Minister says that the program was BC Premier David Eby's idea. What has the Premier said about that? I know he was talking this morning.
So the Premier also had a press conference, and he said, yes, that was BC's idea, but it was better than the idea that Ottawa was floating, which is similar to the deal that Ontario got, which is scrapping the GST on new homes. Eby said that would benefit just a fraction of new home buyers. However, he was really on the defensive when asked about this program, and here's a bit of what he had to say.
If people hate it, that's okay. We don't have to do it. But I actually think that ultimately we'll be buying below the cost of construction. No developers will be profiting from this. It'll give people an opportunity to buy a home that wouldn't otherwise have it. And it's cheaper than government could build new homes on our own.
And now the Premier did say that, for example, there likely won't be any condos bought by the government in Vancouver. It's just too expensive. So he will be targeting, Vancouver Island and the Okanagan. I did ask him, though, why not get the government, the federal government, to pitch in for the Community Housing Fund, which was a program that BC scrapped a few months ago, where, nonprofits said they were ready to build below market housing, and that funding was taken away. So the Premier said that's something that he's considering down the road. But again, for now, we don't know when the government will move on buying these condos, but it is still, the statements today did not take away the criticism. The critics are still calling for this program to be scrapped.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so we now have Andy Yan, who is joining us now in studio. Andy, thank you for coming in.
Pleasure, Sarah.
Andy is an associate professor at Simon Fraser University and director of the City program. There are some, we were just talking to Katie, and she's acknowledging that there are some critics who are looking at this plan, and their first reaction is this is a bailout to developers who can't sell their condos. What is it?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. That perhaps goes to the overall problem of how this first came out in terms of just an announcement of trying to kind of purchase 2,200 condo units somewhere in British Columbia without necessarily beginning with perhaps a much more kind of productive kind of conversation of who we're trying to help, we're trying to help connect it up with what we're trying to do in terms of what kind of units we're trying to kind of connect people to.
And we don't, there's a lot that we don't know here. I heard Katie say, Katie's talking about the fact that Vancouver is probably too pricey for the condos to be purchased, so they're looking at other areas of the province that are a little more affordable. For people who are priced out of the current market, could this Could this plan be helpful?
Well, that's the really interesting question, is that we just don't know. That a lot of this is still the details that still have to be coming forward, much less the kind of understanding of what is the market right now when it comes to condominiums. That when it comes to condominiums in the province of British Columbia, and more specifically in metropolitan Vancouver, their rates, their unabsorbed rates are actually at 36-year highs. So I think that this provides the kind of profound challenges in terms of what's happening to the market, much less the kind of issues of what people need. And I think this is also the kind of bridge that needs to be happening that just hasn't been very clear.
So without me suggesting that this is a bailout, and I'm not trying to do that, and I don't want to sound overly naive here, but if you are trying to sell a home, a condo, and it's not selling for the price that you have posted it to, should that price not drop naturally?
One might think that you might want to kind of drop those prices. You could perhaps provide some incentives, maybe a vacation in Mexico, but that it's very much really, I think, an understanding that if your units aren't selling, that you might see the prices come down. And for which I think this is really one of the kind of big challenges in terms of how much should they come down, much less at what point should government step in.
Yeah, and then how much, I suppose, and we don't know the answer to this, should government actually pay for these units, right? We don't have that information.
Well, that's exactly part of the challenge, is the actual details of really, are governments going to buy this on discount? If what kind of, are they going to buy them in onesies and twosies, or in blocks, or in entire buildings? That these are entire details that have actually tremendous implications towards cost, as well as the kind of format of the program, as well as whom exactly you're supposed to house.
And the other question I have about this is, if you have homeowners out there who have put their houses on the market, they've not dropped their house. We know that there are houses that are sitting on the market for 100 days before they're selling, and that has been traditionally a bit unusual for Vancouver. But the developers would be, I see here, treated differently than the individual homeowners, perhaps because they're selling or have more units, I guess,
and that's
to
precisely,
sell.
And that's precisely one of the biggest challenges, is really the homeowners that are already in the market that I say are purchasing some of these condos that were formerly, that were absorbed, and now are in direct competition with the government in some of these units. And I think that, again, it goes into the details of what this program will look like, but most importantly, whom we're trying to help.
What do you imagine the reaction for, let's put the condo owner who is in a building where there are a lot of vacant, I'm just imagining the scenario, a lot of vacancies, there are unsold condo units that now the government absorbs and they become housing that's more affordable for people to move into. What do you imagine that neighbor-to-neighbor reaction or a relationship might be?
And that neighbor would get the assessment record, would say that now their condo that they just bought at a certain price is now at the price through which the government just bought. And I think that it's, be profoundly complex in terms of a mixture of feelings, but because you're fitting into a building that now is filled, but then also one that I think is not necessarily the intention of what that person thought that the communities they would have been buying into.
Yeah, and important to say, this is not to suggest in any way that there isn't a need for housing. No. There is, certainly, in major cities, particularly Toronto, Vancouver. If you had imagined a scenario of how best to address the housing need, would this have come? Is this something you have ever considered or seen happen elsewhere?
Well, the first thing I would do is actually center whom I'm trying to help. What kind of populations are really struggling in terms of connecting to a supply of housing? That we've certainly seen the private sector be able to produce a certain type of housing, but yet what's the gap? Why can't some of these households meet that gap? And I think that whether it comes to ownership or it comes to rental, that it's being centered policy in terms of the need as opposed to the unit, I think is perhaps one of the missing discussions here. And I think that this is one of the challenges that one hopefully will see as this program eventually rolls out, that how those details might look like.
Well, Andy, I feel like as this program and the details become clear and it starts to roll out, we're going to be having this conversation a few times, because this seems like such a new sort of venture for the government to, in terms of fixing the housing crisis that there is. So look forward to speaking to you again.
You know where to find me.
Andy, thank you very much. Andy Yen, Director of the City Program at Simon Fraser University.